about the story of khana and how I sort of parachuted in from the jungle. So I was born deep in the jungle, actually in a shack over a waterfall on the island of Molokai, which is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in Hawaii. I grew up on this sort of pseudo quasi-socialist vagabond community, which had a lot of organic farmers. And I think that's quite formative to how I have framed living and traveling and experiencing new cultures, especially living without any electricity and no traffic lights. So when I experience the traffic in Georgia, I'm quite amused. This is my father. He's probably going to kill me for putting this. But the best travel advice I ever got is just to get lost and to have absolutely no expectations. And thank goodness I've had no expectations. Just coming to the Caucasus and how I ended up here. So the very first time I traveled out of the country was in French Polynesia. And I just fell in love with how sassy the French are and how they cultivate black pearls. And I learned hitchhiking when I was 12 years old at a really young age. And so that was certainly one of the most beautiful experiences. And this was actually my first boyfriend. He had this like banana cloth, and I actually didn't speak any, this was an Easter island, and if you want to learn a new culture, you can always get a boyfriend. I was 12, didn't speak any Spanish, we didn't need words. But I would sit there as a young girl without electricity and spin the globe, and I would stop it, and my finger would go, always on the Caspian Sea, or the Black Sea, ironically. And I always had this epiphany that one day I would end up either in Azerbaijan, Georgia, or Armenia. But nevertheless, I set off, and I first lived in Egypt. I was living in Germany, the Netherlands, Morocco, so on and so forth. I've traveled to over 100 different countries, mostly traveling alone. I really love traveling alone, actually. And yeah, I had absolutely no idea that I would be deported from Germany. It's a story for a lot of vodka. Or I would be branded as a CIA spy by the Azerbaijani authorities, most recently earlier this year, for inculcating the masses. But nevertheless, always be open to surprises. And somehow I managed to find my way on the top of the roof of the House of Commons in London. And I had the idea to do a Fulbright in political science on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict reconciliation. And I thought this would be a really interesting experience. And so I parachuted into Azerbaijan. This was not my boyfriend. And I just fell in love with the Caucasus. And I sniffed the Caspian Sea. It smelled like oil. It was not as romantic as I thought. But nevertheless, I spent the entire year just listening. And until one day I decided I really want to go into a khana. And I wanted to learn Badgavan and to sip tea with the locals. And they told me, "Where is your father?" Where's my father? Like, what is this question? And then I realized that actually a whole part of the population is marginalized from some of the most important conversations that are happening in communities, and that's women, or minorities, so on and so forth. So the idea of khana started to use this iconography and that term and reappropriate it and elevate those stories to a new level. And so I really wanted to just use that and use some of the things I'm passionate about, from photography to documentary films, transmedia, just innovative tools to communicate the messages and amplify the voices of those who are not represented. So I had a lot of work to do. I finished my master's in London, and this is me on my way to hitchhike in Abkhazia. I had a lot of homework to do, and I decided to found khana, and everyone had told me that I would fail. But nevertheless, khana is now an online platform, and it is giving a voice to women, minorities, a lot of different voices. We have over 10 staff and over 200 journalists from Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, and all the 3 conflict zones as well. And so what is the essence of khana? We're publishing in 5 different languages, which is a lot, Russian, English, Azerbaijani, Armenian, and Georgian. And we're highlighting voices like these women. This one, for instance, this was an early child. This was a bride. She stopped going to school when she was 10 years old, and she was married at the age of 17. And her voice doesn't usually make mainstream news, which is why we chose to cover her. We're also giving a voice to conflict-affected individuals across the region, so just really beautiful stories that are never really discussed across the region. And so these minority groups are what we want to focus on. We also are doing community engagement events. So we have photo exhibitions and we have film screenings. We just had one on the rooftop of Fabrica, for instance. And it's these stories that we want to get out there for other people to also explore different cultures. And it's almost like each piece takes you on a traveling experience. So that's the story of khana and how I came from the jungle and started this.